Good morning, dear guests and colleagues. In celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month, or MANAMO. To start today's webinar, I wish to request Acting Director Fides Quintos to give the opening prayer, which will then be followed by the singing of the Philippine National Anthem.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. God Almighty, we thank you for this opportunity to hold this webinar. May it be a successful webinar, and may the presentations instill in our audience a deeper appreciation of our maritime heritage, an unceasing desire to protect it, and the humanity to share in its abundance. We thank you for the continued guidance and support that we receive from our leaders and colleagues at the Department of Foreign Affairs, and for the close cooperation from all the hardworking Philippine government agencies we work with. We pray for each other's continued health and well-being. We pray that you continue to protect us from the ongoing pandemic and grant healing to those who have been infected. We ask that you continue to instill in us strength to continue with our daily tasks despite the many hardships brought about by this pandemic. This we ask and pray. Amen.
At this point, I have the honor to invite Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office Assistant Secretary Maria Angela A. Ponce to give the opening remarks. Just to quickly introduce our Assistant Secretary, ASEC Maria Angela Ponce, or Ma'am Ange, joined Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office in March of this year after her assignment at the Philippine Mission to the United Nations in New York, United States of America, where she served as Minister. Prior to her posting to the Philippine Mission to the UN in New York, Ma'am Ange was assigned to the Philippine Embassy in Paris as First Secretary and Consul and Deputy Permanent Delegate to the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, or UNESCO. Ma'am Ange has a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the Philippines and a Master of Laws degree from University College London, the United Kingdom. May I now request Assistant Secretary Maria Angela Ponce to give her opening remarks.
Good morning. Thank you, Francis, and good morning to all the participants of our webinar on Maritime Champions. Good evening from the part of the world where I am right now. Today, we're fortunate to have with us marine and maritime advocates who, in their respective fields, made notable contributions and exhibited extraordinary feats. As we celebrate the Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month for MANAMO this year, we are still faced with the everyday difficulties brought about by the current pandemic. While we remain resilient, this health crisis transcends geopolitical boundaries and thus requires strong will and unceasing determination to collectively overcome this challenge. COVID-19 is not, however, the only serious threat confronting humanity. Our oceans and seas are also at risk, and there is an immediate need to address this as responsible members of the global community. The pandemic has also contributed to the deterioration of our marine space of our oceans and our seas. We hope that the participants would gain inspiration from the accomplishments of our panelists and take action towards the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 14, or Life Below Water, on the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Our panelists come from diverse backgrounds and sectors. We have Dr. Deo Florence Onda, who will provide us with his experience as the first Filipino to reach the bottom of the MDM Deep. We also have with us Dr. Jo Marie Acebes, who will let us swim with the whales and dolphins through her research work at baliana.org. Our colleague from the Philippine Coast Guard, Ensign Ralph Barahan, will on the other hand provide us with a glimpse of his experience in saving the lives of passengers and crew on board MV Siargao Princess in 2019. And last but not the least, we will hear from Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda, who has been advocating in Congress and beyond marine environmental protection initiatives. Again, thank you for those who are joining us in the Philippines and various parts of the world. Let us all celebrate Manamo through our common seas, livelihood, and heritage. Thank you.
I request for your continued attention for the welcome remarks of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Teodoro L. Locsin Jr.
Good morning. The celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nations Awareness Month each September aims to raise our awareness of the Philippines' maritime heritage. At a time when our spirits have been burdened by the nearly two-year pandemic, we hope that this webinar on Maritime Champions will not just raise awareness, but also uplift us. The webinar showcases remarkable individuals who, through their actions, have made us proud and grateful and awakened a renewed sense of hope. The department takes pride in having with us Philippine Coast Guard Ensign Ralph Barahan, the first Filipino to be honored by the International Maritime Organization with its exceptional award for bravery. And it is easy to see why. With courage and instinct honed from years of Coast Guard survival training, he saved the lives of all 61 of his fellow passengers in the MV Siargao Princess during an ill-fated voyage from Bohol to Cebu. From Courage on the Seas, we get to hear an adventure that may well be a chapter in Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Last March, Dr. Deo Florence Onda joined the MDN Deep Expedition and became the first Filipino to reach the third deepest point on Earth, at more than 10,000 meters down the sea. The sight of him proudly waving the Philippine flag when they emerged made us swell with national pride. Dr. Jo Marie Acebes, founder of baliana.org, brings us back to the surface with her work on tracking whale and dolphin populations of the Philippines. Who knew that humpback whales and even a pygmy blue whale frequent our waters? With baliana.org's program of bringing volunteers on board actual survey trips in the seas of Batanes and Bohol, Dr. Acebes has given many students youth summers that will remain with them for their lifetimes. My fellow legislator and journalist, Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda, caps it off with what she has been doing to protect our marine environment. Lauren is our #1 crusader on climate change and environmental protection. She has passed laws that have made the air we breathe cleaner, our lives safer from disasters. And now she is working to protect our seas from the detritus of plastics, so that whales may swim freely, the biodiversity of our marine depths may survive and thrive, and our ships sail pristine waters. Truly, they are champions inspiring our race through action. I congratulate our Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office for bringing them and their stories of courage to us. Thank you.
The Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office is very proud and excited at the caliber of our speakers this morning, who wholeheartedly agreed to participate in this webinar to share their experiences and promote the causes which they champion. Dr. Deo Florence L. Onda is a microbial oceanographer and associate professor and deputy director for research at the Marine Science Institute in the University of the Philippines. He recently made history for becoming the first Filipino to reach the bottom of the Mden Deep, the third deepest point on Earth, after he was invited by the private organization Kaladan Oceanic to join the Mden Deep expedition. Our second presenter is Dr. Jo Marie Acebes, who is a senior museum researcher at the Zoology Division of the National Museum of Natural History in the Philippines. She is the founder of Baliena.org, an organization composed of like-minded individuals from across the country and around the world, which has helped raise awareness, promote conservation, and increase scientific knowledge of whale and dolphin populations in the Philippines. Our third presenter is Philippine Coast Guard Ensign Ralph Barahan, the first Filipino honored with the International Maritime Organization's Award for Exceptional Bravery at Sea for saving the lives of all 62 passengers and crew of the ill-fated vessel MV Siargao Princess, November 2019. Previous recipients of this award from more advanced countries relied on superior technology and equipment. On that fateful day, Ensign Ralph Barahan only had his training, muscle, and fighting will, and it was all he needed to ensure that everyone survived from that sinking vessel. And to top it off, we have Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda, who brought her advocacy of environmental conservation and protection, which she began in the 1980s, to the Philippine legislature. During her incumbency as senator, she actively espoused for the passage of important environmental measures, such as the Philippine Clean Air Act and the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. Now, as Deputy Speaker in the House of Representatives, she continues to champion environmental causes by authoring and co-authoring bills, resolutions that seek to address environmental concerns. Deputy Speaker Legarda is the principal author of House Bill 00635, an act regulating the manufacturing, importation, and use of single-use plastic products and providing penalties, levies, and incentive systems for industries, business enterprises, and consumers thereof. Before we proceed to the first presenter, we would like to first show the following short video presentation.
As you remember that unfateful day, November 7, 2019, the trainings from my career had helped me save 62 lives, including my own.
We went for the first time to the Mden Deep in the Philippine Trench. The experience of just going there.
Very important to protect the waters around these areas. This is where they give birth, this is where they find their mate. So if you disturb them or you disrupt the ecosystem,
They should also assist other countries, including vulnerable nations and developed nations, or the less consumptive nations who are non-emitters in the world, like the Philippines, but who is suffering the most. We are so interconnected, whether it's your ocean in your side of the world or our ocean.
Now, without any further delay, I invite Dr. Deo Florence Onda to give his presentation, to share with us his experiences being part of the expedition that traveled to the Mden Deep, the third deepest point on Earth. Dr. Onda, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Francis, and good morning to everyone. Good morning to friends and colleagues all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'd like to thank first the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office for the invitation, an avenue and an opportunity to share to tell tales of the deep or of the endem deep. So the title of my presentation is actually Into the Unknown, diving into the endem deep. At the end of this presentation, I would like you to appreciate that the story of the endem deep is actually beyond me. Most of the stories that you see were highlighting the Filipino who actually went down. But from this presentation, I'd like you to remember what the endem deep is and how it is connected to us, even though it is 10,000 meters away from us. So I'd like to start with this quote. And because it's Manamo, I'd like you to remember that we know more about the surface of the moon and Mars than we do know about the deep seafloor or the deep ocean, despite the fact that we have yet to extract a gram of food, a breath of oxygen, or a drop of water from those bodies. And in reality, and until now, there were more people who actually had been to the space or were able to visit space, outer space, or had been to the cosmos than those who were able to visit the deepest parts of the biggest ecosystem on Earth, which is the oceans. So that tells us that there's a lot more to know about the oceans. But the deep sea explorations have been compared a lot with the early history of flights on space because of the immense pressure and the technological advancement that you need in order to reach the bottom of the oceans. There had been a slow progress on the attempts to actually visit the deepest trenches in the world, including the endem deep. The first recorded attempt to actually look at the deepest part of the ocean was when Magellan tried to measure the full ocean depth of the Pacific Ocean, but of course he did not succeed in 1521. The next milestone was in the 1930s when the first deepest crewed descent, meaning a persons within a submersible was able to actually go down to a depth of around 435 meters on board the Bathysphere, the first submersible that time. The second milestone in deep sea exploration was in 1960 when Picard and Don Walsh was able to reach 10,730 meters and discovered the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench, which is actually the deepest trench in the world, via the submersible Trist. In 2012, James Cameron tried descending to the Marianas Trench alone. And in 2019, the new record was set by Victor Vescovo via the DSV limiting factor by reaching around the depth of 10,900. And he is also the only person that was able to actually visit the deepest trenches in the 5 continents of the world. And in 2021, a record was set because for the first time, the 3rd deepest trench was visited by humans. So the endem deep is just in our backyard. So the map that you're seeing on the right, just to give you an idea where it is, it's actually off Siargao. It's in the northern part of the Philippine Trench. It was called endem because it was first discovered by the German research vessel Endem in 1927, thus the name endem deep. But it was further explored in 1951 to 1952 by the Danish researchers on board the ship Galathea. That's why the endem deep is also sometimes called the Galathea Deep or the Philippine Deep. And it isn't from that expedition that they were able to get biological samples from the bottom of the trench and a deep sea anemone, which they call the Galathean tenum. But it was only in 2021, and for the longest time, no one actually attempted to visit the endem deep. It was only in 2021 that the first crewed descent was actually successfully carried out. So my story of being able to visit the endem deep started with an invitation. One day I just received an email from the Caledon Oceanic and Victor Vescovo. I was asking them how the process was, but they were not telling me how they selected me. They were just saying that there were a couple of names that they needed to pick from. And luckily or fortunately, I was chosen to actually represent the Filipinos in that expedition. He's a visionary American explorer. He has been setting records. He has summited the 7 peaks of the world and visited the deepest trenches. And he was the main sponsor of the expedition. He was also the man behind the technology that allowed him to actually go repeatedly dive in the deepest trenches of the world. If you're going to look back into history, most of the submersibles that were used to actually go to Mariana Trench or in the other trenches of the world, they were only able to use it once and never again. But the DSV limiting factor, or the deep submersible vessel limiting factor, is the first IMO certified submersible that can actually travel full ocean depth repeatedly, meaning go to the surface and then can just go back to the deepest part of the ocean again. And one of the key features of that is because the ball inside, where the cabin or where the passengers are hosted, is actually made up of 90 millimeters of titanium with an almost perfect spherical shape that allowed it to actually become habitable even though even after crossing 10,000 meters below the sea. So this is the inside of the submersible. This is where the two passengers are seated beside each other, and this is actually very small. The DSV limiting factor has a support vessel where it is docked, called the DSSV pressure drop, or the Deep Sea Submersible Support Vessel Pressure Drop. So this is the submersible you're seeing on the water, and then this is the support vessel. The form here is the winch here is the one that is being used to launch or take the submersible up and down. Caledon Oceanic has been setting records all over the world. They visited the deepest trenches in the 5 continents. They visited the first and the second. And I think it was just really on the line that they visit the 3rd deepest trench in the world, which is the Endem Deep. And luckily, fortunately, I was selected and invited to actually go with them. So each of the expedition has its own badge. So this is the badge for the Philippine Trench Expedition. So it was in March 2021 that we were able to sail off the port of Guam and proceed to the Philippine Trench. The entire planning took around a year, and the pandemic actually halted it. Around December, we already called it off, but around January, we started negotiating and then communicating again. And finally, the travel expedition was finalized and carried out in March 2021. I would also like to emphasize that I was not the only Filipino on board. Half of the crew were actually Filipinos. I felt at home. It is also to emphasize the importance and the contributions of Filipino seafarers all over the world. Remember that we did this in the midst of the pandemic. Amidst the pandemic, Filipino crew are actually running this vessel. So big hats off to these guys. So in March 23, we started the descent around 6:30 in the morning. It took around 4 hours to go down. Slowly, light was dissipating, temperature was decreasing, and you can feel the pressure actually increasing. And then you were saying goodbye to the surface of the world. So this was the actual launch of the submersible where we were housed. Sorry, I'm just gonna rewind that. If you are able to notice, there were only 2 windows, no? One for the passenger and one for the pilot, for the main pilot. And everything felt surreal. It felt like you're out of this world. It felt like going to another world, actually. This is the actual video from the inside the submersible when we landed, or when we reached the bottom of the Philippine Trench. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what the surface would look like. But when we reached the bottom was actually very smooth. There's a lot of sediments, there's a lot of murkiness because of the falling sediments from the surface and accumulating at the bottom. And when we disturbed it, it kind of just floated around. Once we reached the bottom of the trench, we had 4 hours to actually explore. So we landed at the center of the Endem Deep, in the center of the Philippine Trench, and then we decided to actually explore the western wall, which is going to the side of the main Philippines, of the archipelago of the Philippines. And this is what we saw. A lot of this deep sea anemone. These are the true forming sea anemone called Galathean tenum. These were the same anemone that were retrieved by Galathea expedition in the 1950s. And it is the first time, to see them actually living there in their own habitat. Another thing that we saw is that there's a lot of critters called amphipods. Amphipods are like cockroaches of the sea. They scavenge any debris that would fall from the surface to the bottom. So what we did was to put a bait, a mackerel, and they were feasting on the mackerel. So imagine if you if you dive there, and then this is what will happen to you when you reach the bottom of the Philippine Trench. A feast of amphipods will welcome you. We also saw this very deep sea jellyfish, which is now the deepest recorded jellyfish in history. But aside from that, aside from signs of life, it just showed us that the deep sea, even though it's 10 meters below the sea, it's actually not lifeless. There's an entire ecosystem that is working down there. The thing is that aside from this living organisms, we also saw a lot of marine debris, plastics. This white material here, it was a funny story because I thought it was a jellyfish, and then I was asking Victor to go in that direction to check it out. But as we approached the material, it became apparent that it was actually a plastic debris. I've mistaken a plastic debris as a jellyfish. And that was the first time I saw plastics down there. And then every 5 minutes, I was encountering more and more marine debris as we approached the Western Wall, telling us that it was not us who actually first conquered the Endem Deep. It is the imprints of human contamination which had been there long ago, a long way before us. You'll see a lot of different plastics. You'll see entire plastic bags, packaging of chips. I've seen a shirt, a pair of pants, a teddy bear. Victor saw the teddy bear too. So it just tells us that there is a strong connectivity on the actions that we have on land and the different parts of the marine ecosystem. That whatever we do on land will always have an impact and effect in another part of the environment. And for example, here it's the Endem Deep. Imagine 10,000 meters below, you see a lot of plastics. The entire expedition itself was not classified. It was classified as a non-MSR. It was not designed to be a marine scientific research activity, but rather just an exploration and record setting. Nevertheless, it was able to achieve several objectives. One is to increase the awareness of the Filipinos of their maritime domains. Also emphasize the importance of science and contributions of scientists to development and national progress. And also it provided a sense of pride and belongingness by appreciating more a previously unknown marine heritage, which is actually the Endem Deep. When we talk about explorations and expeditions, I've been leading expeditions to the West Philippine Sea. My colleagues have been going to the Benham Rice, to the Sulu Sea, to the Mindanao Sea, but it is very rare that we actually talk about another heritage going down, which is actually the Philippine Trench and the Endem Deep. It also highlighted environmental issues such as plastics pollution by visualizing the extent and the gravity of the problem. So as we celebrate the Manamo, so happy Manamo to everyone, we should be reminded not only of the rich biodiversity and marine resources we have, but also the responsibility that we have to take care to sustainably use, manage, and protect these resources. The issue of plastics is not only present in the Endem Deep. In expeditions that we had in the West Philippine Sea, we've seen accumulation of plastic debris all over the Kalayaan Island Group, which are actually mostly inhabited islands in the South China Sea and in the West Philippine Sea. In researches that we've done, in studies that we've done, sponsored and funded by the DOST, we've seen that plastics is actually all over the place. It's everywhere. In the coast of Palawan, you will see the varying abundances and types of plastics present on the coast. And if you're gonna look at what type of plastics would you actually find in the coast, number one are still the thin plastic wraps, product labels, and packaging. 2, foamed and styro fragments, and 3, strings, ropes, and 4, ghost nets and fishing lines. So all of this debris are also affecting the different biota in the marine environment, including the mammals that will be discussed later. But the more important question now is, so after the Endem Deep expedition, is that the end for us Filipinos to explore the deep sea environments of the Philippines? For us to move forward in this research discipline, we need to acknowledge the challenges and the limitations. One is that the Philippine marine scientific research community is very much limited with capacity for ocean research. We only have one marine vessel. We only have one research vessel, which is also limited in the coastal or seasonal open ocean expeditions. Most of the vessels present in the agencies are for multiple use and not dedicated for research. There's also need for capacity building and infrastructure. So just to share to you, because it's Manamo, I want you to appreciate that we're trying our best to actually upgrade our capacity, infrastructure, and assets to do marine scientific research in the Philippines. So there's this big program called Upgrade CIA that is funded by the national government that aims, one, to actually come up with a research station in Pag-asa, which we will be calling the Pag-asa Island Research Station, or peers. And two, to establish the National Academic Research Fleet and long-term sustainability development and foreign MSR in the Philippines. And third, to actually continue local MSRs with local collaborators. And fourth, upgrade the capacity of HEIs and SUCs all over the country to increase or to amplify manpower to do marine scientific research. Just to share you a bit on the project that I'm handling, which is on the National Academic Research Fleet. Right now, we only have one research vessel that is dedicated for academic use, but we are now in the process of procuring 4 more research vessels. 4 more, imagine that. So these vessels will be assigned in the different maritime regions of the country. 1 in the northeast Philippines, 2 in the West Philippine Sea, 1 in the Sulu Sea, and 1 in the Visayan Sea. So researchers can go out there and explore the oceans at the same time. And that is already a big leap to what we have right now. And it is not just, you know, a few years program. It is actually a long-term development program. We have a long-term sustainability program for this that would that we are envisioning to stay until 2035. And from there, we build more of the National Academic Research Fleet. We're also launching the National Academic Research Fleet website soon. So I hope that you also become interested with that and visit that website. I'd like to also highlight that when we talk about the marine environment, we do not only need marine scientists. We need different expertise actually working in the maritime and marine environment, maritime regions and marine environment. We need more geologists. We need more educators and researchers, chemists and biotech experts, oceanographers, maritime experts, law experts on the seas, maritime marine engineers, managers and policymakers, and all of that. Gearing towards we have now entered the ocean science decade. And I hope in the next decade, all of us listening here right now will contribute to the development, sustainable development, protection and preservation of the marine resources that we have. We are actually in a sea of opportunities right now. So with this, I would like to thank again, just a shout out to the Department of Foreign Affairs, especially the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Division, with us Asek Gorbailen, Director Atienza, also to Dr. J. Batong Bakal, Mr. Chris Madrigal, and the U.S. Embassy, who actually helped us finalize the plans for the Endem Deep expedition. So with that, again, happy Manamo to everyone, and thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Onda, for that insightful and eye-opening presentation. It was very deep, and congratulations. Now to give a presentation on how research on whale and dolphin populations in the Philippines can contribute to marine conservation, we now have Dr. Jo Maria Aceves. Dr. Aceves, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. And thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar. It is a privilege to be speaking today alongside accomplished and known Filipinos such as Dr. Onda, Honorable Deputy Speaker Legarda, and Ensign Barahan. I'll share my screen for everyone to see. Hope you can see my screen. So today I'll be sharing about our nonprofit organization that I established together with some friends and colleagues. It's called Baliena.org. I will talk about how we got started, the work that we do, and the challenges that we face, and how we continuously work towards marine conservation through whale and dolphin research in the Philippines. I hope that by the end of my talk, you will remember at least one thing, that we do have large whales in our seas, even a whale as majestic as a humpback whale, and that there are Filipino marine whale scientists, not just myself. I began my career in marine mammal science and marine conservation when I joined WWF Philippines, also known as Kabang Kalikasan ng Pilipinas. I was fortunate to be given the opportunity to work on a new project that they were setting up at that time on humpback whales in the Babuyan group of islands in Cagayan in northern Luzon. At that time, I was a fresh veterinary medicine graduate, no experience, but newly licensed. So for someone like me with no experience at all in this field, entering the field was very tough, and the learning curve was very steep. But with the support of senior staff of WWF Philippines and colleagues there, we successfully established the first humpback whale research project in the country. When WWF concluded their humpback whale project in 2006, I, together with a few other former volunteers and friends, decided to continue the work. Through a small grant and contributions from volunteers, I managed to organize the first humpback whale research survey independent of WWF in 2007. From then on, I continued to working towards achieving the original objectives of WWF project at that time. So it was to determine the abundance, the distribution, and population identity of humpback whales that were migrating in the Babuyan Marine Corridor. So today, the humpback whale research and conservation project is led by Ballena.org. Ballena.org is a small nonprofit with a mission to support the conservation of whales, dolphins, and porpoises and their natural habitats in the Philippines. We aim to achieve this through participatory research, advocacy, education, and local capacity building for communities and other relevant stakeholders. So how exactly do we do what we do? Our flagship project is the conservation of the Babuyan Marine Corridor. It is the only breeding ground of humpback whales in the Philippines. The humpback whale is what you would call a flagship and umbrella species for marine conservation. So this means the humpback whale is like an ambassador, an icon or a symbol, for the habitat or the ecosystem that it lives in. So in this case, the Babuyan Marine Corridor. It gives attention to that place and raises support for the entire ecosystem. And by protecting and conserving the humpback whales, you protect all other living organisms that are living within that same ecosystem. So when we monitor the status, the distribution, and the movement patterns of abundance of humpback whales, we do this through boat-based surveys and photo identification. So how do we do this? So when we do boat-based surveys, we use the modified line transect method. So we go around the islands looking for whales and dolphins, marking their GPS locations, identifying the species, counting them, and noting their behavior. When we do see a humpback whale, we would conduct focal follows. So we follow them, we try to approach them, but from a reasonable distance, and then we conduct fluke photo identification. This method is used for mark recapture studies. So basically the pattern, coloration, and the shape of each fluke of a humpback whale is unique for every individual whale. So it's like a fingerprint for humans. And this is what we use to be able to count them, to monitor their movements within the breeding ground, between other breeding grounds, and in feeding grounds that they go to. Aside from doing photo ID, we also record humpback whale vocalizations. So humpback whales, male humpback whales can sing. So we record this and we analyze it. We also take biopsy samples for genetic analysis whenever we have the opportunity. We also monitor the threats and assess the threats that exist in that particular area for cetaceans. So what do we know about humpback whales so far in the Babuyan Marine Corridor? The humpback whales that migrate to the BMC, or Babuyan Marine Corridor, are considered to be part of the Asian stock of the Western North Pacific population of humpback whales. And currently, the estimate for this population is only about 1,000 animals. And it has also been recognized as part of this distinct population segment of humpback whales in the Western North Pacific. And they are considered threatened in some of the areas where they are found, including in the Philippines. We have so far over 250 individual whales in our fluke catalog, and we have an average of about 103 humpback whale sightings per season, and about 27 photo identified per season, at least pre-pandemic. Based on our last matching efforts, this means we match photographs from our fluke catalog with other catalogs around the world, especially within the breeding grounds in the Western North Pacific. We have found that we have 86 matches with Ogasawara and 100 matches with Okinawa in Japan. And based on our analysis of within region return index, meaning how many whales and how frequent do the whales return to the BMC every season, the rate of interchange is actually, the whales actually exhibit very high site fidelity. So meaning many of the whales keep coming back to the BMC every season. And while in terms of interchange index, meaning how many whales and how frequent do the whales move between other breeding grounds such as Japan, the rate of interchange is almost about the same with Okinawa and Ogasawara in Japan. Through international collaborations, we have also found that we have 2 matches with Hawaii, meaning 2 of our whales have been seen also in Hawaii, which is also a breeding ground. And 1 whale has been seen in the Mariana Archipelago. While in the feeding grounds in the north, we have found that 3 whales have matched with those in Alaska. So the whales that come to the Babuyan Marine Corridor feed all the way to Alaska, as well as to the Russian Far East. So in the Russian Far East, we've had more matches. So we've had 28 matches with Russia. Unfortunately, there are many threats to marine mammals. One of them was already mentioned by Dr. Onda earlier, and many of these threats that occur in the country for marine mammals exist in the BMC. Probably the biggest or the main threat is the destruction or degradation of their habitats. And this could be from pollution. It could be from any type of pollution, chemical, plastic, or solid waste. It could be from black sand mining. It could be from unregulated coastal development, even dynamite and cyanide fishing. Although dynamite and cyanide fishing is no longer as rampant in that area for at least since 10 or 12 years ago. Aside from that, there is also the threat from disturbance or even direct injury to the whales. This could be from large ships or boat traffic, unregulated tourism activities, even accidental entanglement or capture in fishing gear. Again, as mentioned by Dr. Onda earlier, there's a lot of what you would call ghost nets or ghost gear. These are no longer active or discarded fishing gear floating around our seas, and this can entangle whales and eventually lead to their death. What have we achieved so far? I think our greatest achievement as an organization is basically putting the Philippines in the humpback whale distribution map around the world. Through the data that we have gathered, analyzed, and presented in conferences, meetings, and have published, scientists around the world found out that humpback whales breed in the Philippines. So prior to 2000, or before WWF initiated that project on humpback whales, no one knew, no scientists around the world knew that humpback whales breed in the Philippines. The data that we have collected has also contributed to worldwide, region-wide, and nationwide assessments of the species. So this allowed for better assessment of the status of the humpback whales, and it is currently listed as vulnerable under the Philippines Red Data List, also in the IUCN Red List. Our data also contributed to the recent assessment of the species by the International Whaling Commission and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the US, or NOAA. So this species is now listed, at least the Western North Pacific distinct population segment of humpback whales is listed as endangered under the US Endangered Species Act. Oops, sorry. Our data also contributed to the listing or recognition of the BMC as one of the marine key biodiversity areas. This is one of several in our country. And more recently, we also contributed to the designation of the BMC as one of IUCN's important marine mammal areas. And all these different designations, it highlights the importance and the need to protect the entire habitat or ecosystem where the species is found. This demonstrates how the humpback whale is a flagship and an umbrella species for the conservation of the entire babuyan marine corridor. And of course, we do encounter many challenges. And one of the main challenge, and I believe this is not unique to us, is irregular and short-term funding, which of course precludes other challenges. One of the most crucial is access to a survey vessel. So we don't own our own boat, unlike MSI. We rent a local outrigger boat from locals in Camiguin Norte, and they have been our trusted crew for more than 10 years now. And unfortunately, this year, the Marina and the PCG imposed additional restrictions to vessels that can travel to and from the islands. These imposed requirements are basically requirements that our local boat crew just couldn't comply, mainly because of the cost. And since the pandemic began, the quarantine and other travel restrictions have been one of our biggest challenges as well. This meant we lost survey weeks and weeks of survey efforts since 2020. So this is a lot of lost research time because of the pandemic. Marine mammal research and conservation, unfortunately, is not exactly the priority of our government. And there's this disconnect between development and conservation. For example, one of the islands in the Babuyan Marine Corridor is being eyed for development. This region, as I said earlier, has been identified not just a marine key biodiversity area, an important marine mammal area, but it's also an important bird area. And Fuga Island, which is actually the first island where humpback whales were confirmed to occur in the country, is going to be developed into a smart city. This means they plan to build resorts, hotels, casinos, and even a golf course. And you can just imagine what impact that would have on the environment of this island. And in the BMC itself, the first large-scale offshore mining operation began in January this year. But despite the challenges, there are plenty of opportunities. And compared to the time when I started in this field, there are more younger students or younger people, students interested in getting into the field of marine mammal science. And that's really good news. Every year, we get students asking us for internship and volunteer opportunities. We get people from all backgrounds, from all over the country and all around the world wanting to volunteer with us. And with social media, we are able to reach more people and are able to share what we know about these marine mammals in our country and the threats that they face. With new technologies and international research collaborations, we are able to do more and know more about these amazing marine animals. But of course, there's always a lot more that needs to be done, but with opportunities to share our work and to collaborate, such as today, hopefully with MSI very soon, this is all good news. We do need help. And there are many ways that you can help, even as an individual. You can support our work and help us to continue what we are doing by supporting our fundraising activities, such as through merchandise. We have whale mini plush toys, t-shirts, the field guide for whales and dolphins in the Philippines. You can also support one of our projects or our activities. We also appreciate in-kind donation, such as equipment and even school supplies for our communities, or cash donations. So we also have this scholarship program called Pabaon. This is for students in need in Camiguin Norte and supporting them through high school and college. And you can also support us by virtually adopting a whale from us. Some of you might have heard, I think ASEC is a fan of BTS, so I hope she has heard of this. The BTS Army recently adopted 8 whales from us. So in honor of their 8th anniversary, they adopted 8 whales and named 7 of them after each member of BTS. If you don't know who BTS is, you need to search about it. Yes, and then of course, you can always help us, support us through volunteering with us to join our surveys. And I guarantee you, this is nothing you've ever experienced before in your life. You can also support us by following us on social media, liking us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And yun lang po, maraming salamat at daghang salamat. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Acebes, for your presentation. No doubt that the activities of Balyena.org are manifestly contributing to efforts to raise awareness on the delicate balance of nature and how easily it can be set out of whack due to human activity and negligence. Thank you for your insights. I would like now to invite our third presenter, Philippine Coast Guard Ensign Ralph Barahan, to give his presentation outlining the events and circumstances that led to the sinking of the passenger vessel MV Siargao Princess and the actions he needed to take to save the lives of all the passengers, including his own. Sir Ralph, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great honor to be here today as we celebrate the Maritime Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month. Never in my wildest dream that I'll be able to speak before such amazing individuals with great contributions to our country. As a non-officer of the Philippine Coast Guard prior this pandemic, my life revolves in functions of this organization, mainly on maritime safety administration, maritime law enforcement, maritime security, and marine environmental protection, and maritime search and rescue. Danger is not new to me. I've been working for the protection of coastal waters, marine environment, and safety of life at sea for quite a long time already. Illegal fishermen, poachers, people who abuse the nature are my #1 enemy. But little did I know that the same environment I'm protecting will test me to the limits and change my destiny forever. Parahan, and this is my story of survival. So this is the Katagbakan Port of Loon, Bohol, where MV Siargao Princess left to ferry 62 lives bound to Cebu. I can definitely say that we left this port with the same weather that you can see right now. As I look back on that day of November 7, 2019, I still thank God that this could be the last beautiful sea I've ever seen now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the MV Siargao Princess. I failed to gather the ship's particular of this vessel. All I know is that this fast craft has been operating for only a month at Catagbacan Port. I noticed that the prominent materials were mostly fiberglass and wood. We have weather disturbances that could have compelled the PCG to prevent the ship from departing after the vessel safety inspection. We left to our next port of destination, which is Cebu. So the common question from a lot of people is that how do we survive? So in any crisis, panic will do us more harm, and so I set the tone to prevent the drama in the situation. I am not an expert on surviving maritime incidents. However, I can share to everyone right now the things that we did that led the survival of all the passengers and crew. So number one is that we try to stay calm. So I woke up from the noise of the screaming and panicking passenger and falling belongings. What I thought to be an overreaction was a disaster that is about to happen. Series of waves kept on battering our ship, and nobody expected that because the fair weather conditions when we left the port. So when I looked out the window, I saw white cap waves, and from that moment, I realized that I am not off duty anymore. From this video prior to this video, this is the last video I was able to send to my wife. Prior to this, from the top of my voice, I introduced myself and as a member of the PCG and started instructing everyone to stop moving and to wear their life jackets. I assisted everyone in the front row to transfer at the back of the ship as the ship continues to take in water. Everyone heeded to my call to calm down. I noticed the children were not wearing adult life jackets, so I went up to the upper deck and asked the crew for assistance. So the second thing that saved us is that we were able to establish communication. So my way up to the upper deck is my only time to call and alert Coast Guard Station Southern Cebu and all the substation near the sea, near the area. I provide necessary information on the estimated location and current situation. I immediately look for the bridge. This is where the operation of the ship happens. To talk to the captain amidst the chaos among the confused and emotional crew. The ship is now imbalanced at this moment. The rear end of the vessel is now elevated as its forward continues to take in water. When I reached the bridge, I saw the almost stunned captain trying to provide instructions to some of the crew. I asked him if he was able to send his distress call. He answered yes, and that was really a big help to us that he was able to send distress call because the Philippine Coast Guard was able to detect it and was able to verify our through their radio. So he also told me that he was able to call the ship owner and ask for rescue. No, the captain kept on reassuring me that the rescue will come, but with our location and current situation, I knew it's time to abandon the ship. He strongly refused my idea. I went back to the passenger, with the crew assisting me to distribute jackets for the children. So number 3 is the personal flotation device. So there is a study that a person can drown in less than 60 seconds. It has been reported that it only takes 20 seconds for a child to drown and roughly 40 seconds for adult in some cases. It can take a little as a 1/2 cup of water to enter the lungs and drowning can occur. So having this in mind, I insisted that everyone should have their life jackets and condition everyone that you might abandon the ship at any moment. We assured the passengers that help is on its way and reminded them to stay calm as I go back to the bridge and talk to the captain. So the fourth thing that we did was we were able to abandon the ship on time. What happened in abandoned ship is that abandoned ship is a formal command given in the face of danger, usually the imminent sinking of ship. It lists the duties of each crew member responsible for its order to abandon the ship is given. So this video happened when I was being rescued by the RV 4406. So as you can see that the waves this time are already tamed but prior this medyo malaki talaga yung alon. As the water continues to flood the ship, I know the anxiety among the passengers and crew will not be contained any longer. I went back to the captain and argued that it is time to abandon the ship. He finally agreed and ordered the crew to abandon the ship. With hurried strides, I went back to the passengers and announced that it is time to jump off. One of the most dramatic event was during the abandoned ship, because I was standing at the exit door and asking the passenger to jump one at a time. I remember giving adamant orders to leave all their baggage behind. I started throwing the bags that the passengers are bringing with them as an additional weight might give them a hard time in the water. My heart stopped as I see the ocean devour the big portion of the vessel. But I have to go back inside as there were old people who refused to jump off. The exit door at the rear end of the vessel hit me as it closes due to the waves. I thought I would be locked with the old passengers inside the passenger's cabin, and this time I took an elderly woman forcefully from passenger area while she continues to pray the rosary. In my desperation, I pushed the old people out in the water. I was able to jump right on time before the ship totally sank. So this experience of nearly sinking with the ship is like, this is really unforgettable for me. Next is that there were enough flotation device. Now, ships like this, small crafts or fast craft, oftenly use life rafts. This is a life-saving appliance on every seagoing merchants or passenger ship in addition to the lifeboats. So the difference between the lifeboat and the life raft is that, as you can see, the life raft is not really meant for having passengers on board. So life rafts, kakapit lang po kayo dito. It's not like you can ride on it, no? So as you can see, this is the kind of life raft that we were using that time. So as seen in the picture are the life rafts that we are fortunate to have and were enough to accommodate all of us when we were on the water. With the help of the crew, I gathered all the passengers who were drifted away. So this time, the crew and I were already exhausted as big waves continues to flip the life raft. So I never expected that this could be the case. No, the waves can flip the life raft. So even if you are on the life raft or you're holding onto it, waves can really flip you and the raft, and then you will be scattered again. And what we did is we take them again, each and after the waves. So it's really exhausting, no? But we tried our best and it worked for us. I was lucky I have the paracord bracelet at this moment because I am wearing that bracelet that can be transformed into a rope. So it helped us on tying all the life rafts together. That was so that we were able to see each other and be rescued with ease. No? So together with the captain, I tied the life rafts together at this moment. It was already 2 hours during the incident. So number 6 is we prioritize the most vulnerable. It was already 2 hours now during the when the incident happened. The crying of children and weeping mothers still haunts me today. One mother said, "Ikaw na bahala sa anak ko," and as he helplessly holds onto the raft, I put the elderly man above the raft as he was not able to cling to the ropes anymore. So I have to scold a couple who tries to get above the raft where I put the child on. A young seafarer helped me calm the passenger as we went from raft to raft, reassuring that help is on its way, and I started questioning God, if God is hearing me. And then suddenly someone shouted, "Naana ang Coast Guard." One of the passengers kept shouting, "Naana ang Coast Guard, naana ang Coast Guard." It means nandiyan na yung Coast Guard. Coast Guard is already here. So I looked back and saw BRP Suluan rushing towards us, as it was like everything was in slow motion. With all my strength, I swam to them, shouting, "Children and elderly first." The captain of BRP Suluan, Coast Guard Commander Dan August Carino, revealed that we were no longer in the coordinates provided by the distress call. So he had to follow his instinct and follow the current, hoping that they can see us, they can locate us. And that day, despite of the huge waves, he was able to see us near each other and complete. And I said, God is really present that day. So immediate response Also, the immediate response of Barko ng Republika ng Pilipinas MRB Suluan. This is the 44-meter multi-role vessel of the Philippine Coast Guard from Japan that was formally received on August 4, 2007. The vessel is at the helm of Commander Dan August A. Carino. So I would not like to take all the credit, because this man was the real hero for me. I cannot last for an hour or even 30 minutes without the help of 4406, because we were already exhausted that time. So we also have the local government of Argao Cebu, MDRRMO, also responded to the call and contributing to the success of our rescue. And also, it is the preparedness of Coast Guard District Central Visayas under the leadership of Coast Guard Rear Admiral Ronnie Hill Gavan. They immediately responded to the distress call of MB Siargao Princess, while Coast Guard Station Cebu, Coast Guard Substation Argao, Pato, and Bohol responded to the heed for help. The local government of Argao, Cebu, MDRRM was also there, contributing to the success of the rescue of 62 passengers. Now, this is Coast Guard Station Bohol, who was able to assist us back to our families after the incident. We are really thankful because Philippine Coast Guard Central Visayas was really prepared for any disasters like this. There were medical personnel. As you can see, the foods were prepared by the troops for all the survivors, and there were ambulance and mobility that were able to send us home safely. What seems to be impossible happened on that day of November 7, 2019. 62 lives were able to survive and return back to their families. No, I would like to share the power of social media because this is me. This was the meme I saw when trying to look for my names in the internet. It was funny because I left the scene right after the rescue. I left and I have no communication for 3 days because my phone was lost and I don't have any belongings with me. And after 3 days, as I opened my Facebook account, a lot of comments about this cartoon character and Aquaman was really, the testimonies of the passengers and the people really helped me recover the trauma of the incident. Also, I am very thankful for the awards and recognitions and every opportunities that happened to me after this. I received the IMO award for exceptional bravery at sea and a lot of opportunities. I was able to apply for commissionship. Now, before I was a non-officer, now I was able to finish the officer's course and working as a nurse officer during this time of pandemic. Now, a lot of people will always ask me, how does it feel to be regarded as a hero, but I can not respond to that properly because I always think that I am just a survivor. You know, having experienced the wrath of nature for firsthand is really humbling experience. You know, because we humans are very arrogant to think that we own the world, and when the truth is we are only part of it. We regard ourselves as a species that are on the top of the food chain, yet here we are today, reaping the consequences of our abuses. It is never right to say that I conquered the storm because, you know, ultimately human beings is in the mercy of nature. My gratitude to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Maritime and Ocean Affairs for this opportunity, and I wish you fair winds, clear skies, and following seas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Ralph, for your presentation. It was a great honor meeting you at the Department of Foreign Affairs when we had the handover ceremony of your IMO Award for Exceptional Bravery at Sea in February this year. Now, due to unexpected developments, Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda had to cancel her virtual participation during this webinar. The Office of the Deputy Speaker, however, provided the following recorded message from Deputy Speaker Legarda.
Warm ecological greetings to Secretary Teodoro Locsin, Assistant Secretary Maria Angela Ponce, UN Resident Coordinator Gustavo Gonzalez, distinguished guests, dignitaries. I'm honored to be in the company of Ensign Ralph Barahan of the Philippine Coast Guard. Safety of life at sea is paramount in an archipelago, and we need to appreciate the efforts of each and every person whose job is to protect it. Dr. Deo Florence Onda, I am privileged to have had him as my guest in my weekly webinar, Stories for a Better Normal, which started way back in May of 2020 to show the way towards recovery to a better and more sustainable way to live. And of course, Dr. Jo Marie Aceves, who has made cetacean surveys state of the art. I speak to you all in the company of these experts as a legislator. Last year, during the Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month, MANAMO, I spoke at a webinar organized by the Management Association of the Philippines, along with Dr. Gretchen Daly. That event led to my filing of the PENCAS Bill, the proposed Philippine Ecosystem and Natural Capital Accounting System Act. This is now the subject of an ebook available online with the same speakers as that MANAMO event, series of webinars conducted by the Development Academy of the Philippines and UP Visayas, and I hope my colleagues in Congress see their way through to its passage soon. We cannot manage what we cannot measure. For much of human history, we governed and made policy with the assumption that nature is limitless and therefore did not need to be counted in order to gauge our economic health. The metrics are gross national product, gross domestic product, GDP, GNP, without an assessment of the value of what we lose once we erase ecosystems for gravel or road building. We need infrastructure, yes, of course, but this bill will allow us to calculate what we stand to lose. how much damage we will sustain, what it would actually cost to rehabilitate in proceeding with these ambitious targets that we've set for ourselves. While this bill is pending, I have also committed to ensure in budget deliberations that provisions can be possible to initially do the studies on the blue economy. Only with proper ecosystem and economic data can we solve the problems that beset our longest asset, our coastlines. I also authored a bill prohibiting the use of certain single-use plastics, a reaction to the horror of marine plastics, even microplastics entering the food chain, and our country's humiliating contribution to the problem. This bill is getting some traction and a committee report has been released. There is no question that legislation is only one part of the effort. I'm proud to say I've authored most of the environmental laws passed in the last few decades, from the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act in my first term, the Clean Air Act also as a young senator, and the Clean Water Act, the Renewable Energy Law, the Climate Change Act, the People Survival Fund, the Philippine Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Law, the expanded National Integrated Protected Areas Act, all of these in my second and third terms, and even the requirements to make these laws more real, the funding, the Green Jobs Act as well, the National Environmental Awareness and Education Act. But sometimes my frustration on the levels of enforcement has led me to file the Environmental Protection and Enforcement Bureau Bill that will give the DNR a uniformed force, much like the Coast Guard is for the DOTR. What characterizes this spate of laws and bills is the fact that no single agency can deliver environmental justice. We have to each bear the burden and fight for our own environmental rights. With solid waste, until we can pass the prohibitions, it will be up to every citizen to ensure that they themselves, their families, their communities do not contribute to the problem. We also need citizens that are engaged to ensure the strict implementation and the monitoring of all these laws. The collection and management of waste, once they are generated across an archipelago, becomes too expensive, sometimes impossible unless we mainstream sustainable production, sustainable consumption in our mindsets. And this can be done as our programs to lift people out of poverty succeed. Their bigger purchasing power will necessarily lead to higher waste generation, unless of course our consumers understand and become empowered to choose only products which do not leave a heavy plastic and carbon footprint in our planet. It is possible. Hence the passage of the policies to prohibit what constitutes most of the material that becomes marine waste, and to ensure post-manufacture collection by the producers will be critical. For example, Republic Act 9003, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. It's a forward-looking legislation that I wrote when I was 38 years old, enacted over 20 years ago. I was a very young senator and we passed it. And this envisions a zero waste lifestyle, which, if only understood and implemented by each Filipino, even by each mayor, will drastically lead to improved public health and safety in a healthy environment. Segregation should be at source. Communities must be trained to compost biodegradable materials, which amounts to 60 to 70% of total waste. Plastic-free alternatives and refilling stations should also be encouraged to wean us from our plastic dependency lifestyle. It is my hope that the National Solid Waste Management Commission finally performs its express mandate to list the environmentally harmful materials such as single-use plastic. The effect is a prohibition in the manufacture, trade, and usage of single-use plastic that will reduce plastic and waste pollution at the very source. It must be emphasized that plastics is not just a health, environmental, and ocean issue, but impacts on climate as well. As a Center of International Environmental Law study shows, and I quote, nearly every piece of plastic begins as fossil fuel, and greenhouse gases are emitted at each stage of the plastic life cycle, unquote. With a climate vulnerable country as ours, we need to do our shared responsibility to ensure that our children and the generations after them will have the safe, healthy, sustainable future that they deserve to have. Despite our efforts at policy change, it remains a duty of every Filipino to ensure our country remains as beautiful, vibrant, and safe as when we found it. So I ask every person here, make a pledge with me. Government officials here, speakers, experts doing their part. But beyond these jobs that we have, may I quote Dr. Seuss, whose Lorax character said, and I quote, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not, unquote. Pledge to care and show it by planting a food garden, by reducing your purchases that generate waste, segregate at source, compost, and plant. And help me, help us create and enforce the necessary policies for those individual actions to matter. And let it be said that during our watch, with our talent, our wisdom, our experience, our skills, our power even, we did something to change the way we live so that the place where we are and the state that we leave behind is better than when we found it. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. At this particular point of the program, before we proceed to the open forum, I'd like to request the tech people to take a group picture of the panelists and the MOAO officers. So may I kindly request that the speakers, the MOAO officers turn on your videos if it's not already turned on, so we can have the group picture. As I understand, I will be the one to give the cue. So at the count of 3, with your best smiles, 1, 2, 3. One more photo. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. Now, at this particular juncture of the program, we will now proceed to the open forum, and I will hand over the moderating duties to our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Emmanuel R. Fernandez. Sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Francis, and thank you to our panel of speakers. Our virtual floor is now open for questions. If you'd like to ask a question, please do so by writing it down in the Q&A section. Please state your name and your organizational affiliation. And also, please indicate to which presenter you would like to address such a question. I'll be reading the questions, and the relevant speaker will answer them for everyone to hear. Right now, I can see two questions that were previously written. One is addressed to Deputy Speaker Legarda, but I don't think she can entertain a question. But there's one from Enzin Barahan, and let me read the question. Enzin Barahan, was there a moment during the sinking of the MV Siargao Princess when you realized that this could possibly be the end? What are any daily carry items that you can recommend to us to carry, which could greatly improve our chances of surviving in a difficult or life-threatening situation, like maybe a Swiss knife or a whistle? Ensign Barahan, would you like to answer that question, please?
Yes, thank you for the question. For me, I thought it was the end when the exit door shuts during the abandoned ship. So because I went back to get the old people, the elderly people. So when the exit door shuts, I thought we will be inside and we cannot go out. So I thought that was the end. But you know, the waves keep battering the ship, so the door was opening and closing. So when it opened, I was able to get out with all the elderly. So that time I decided to just push them out of the ship, so we can all be safe. I think with regards to survival kits, what saved me during the incident was the paracord bracelet. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a bracelet that can be dismantled and turned into a rope. It was very helpful during the time now we have to tie the life raft so we don't get separated. Also, yes, a Swiss knife can be really big help also. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer, Ensign Barahan. We also have one, although it doesn't indicate to whom it is addressed. Let me just read it and maybe the relevant speaker can answer. The question is, considering the challenges faced by our country right now, poverty and the like, what maritime concerns should be prioritized to protect our seas? Security, conservation, education, and why? Could any of our panelists address the question, please?
Maybe I can try first. That's a very complicated question. It's the same question that has been asked to me whenever I talk about plastics pollution. Dr. Onda, what's the best approach to actually curb or reduce use of plastics, etc.? And I realized that every time I answer that question, my answer also changes. It just tells me that the marine environment is actually being attacked in every front, from security to traditional emerging new threats and all of those. And I think the approach is that whatever we can do will be the best approach to help in the preservation, conservation of marine resources. Different levels of society and different sort of markets or different sectors will need different approaches. There's not one approach, at least in my experience, there's not one approach that will work for everyone. If we think that security issue is the one threatening the environments in the West Philippine Sea, then we prioritize it for the West Philippine Sea, but we do something else for the other parts of the country. The Philippines is 82% waters and 18% land, 82% water from the east, west, north, south. So the approaches should be different. And I think this is where to highlight that the different sectors of the society, the private, the public, and us from the academe, for example, have our own roles to play. And we need to emphasize that. And I think that's one of the objectives of the MANAMO, for us to appreciate the fact that we are an archipelagic country, and being part of that archipelago, we have different capacity to contribute for the preservation, conservation, and protection of that archipelago. So yeah, for me, whatever you can actually contribute towards the marine environment for sustainable use and protection are actually best approaches. To say what's the priority, I think it would also differ among sectors. I hope that helps. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ronda. There's also a question from Maria Patricia of the DFA Protocol Office, and it is addressed to Dr. Acebes. She asks, what are the requirements to be able to join one of Baliana.org's activities? Is there a strict screening process? Dr. Acebes, please, if you may.
Yes. Hi. Thank you for the question. A lot of people ask us that question. I would say, I'd like to say, now we have a very strict screening process. Pero I wouldn't say it's really strict, but yes, we do have some certain requirements lang naman that not very difficult for people to comply with or to be able to fulfill, to join us. So it really depends on the project, because we do have several projects where we call on volunteers where you can join us. So depending on the project, let's say if we take the Babuyan Marine Corridor as our example project, every year we call for volunteers, and we basically just ask people who are interested on whales and dolphins, willing to learn the methods that we use in the research. And as much as possible, it's not a strict requirement, but if you are comfortable on boats, that's definitely a plus. Because obviously, if you are the type who gets easily seasick, that could become a problem. And it's not just for us, but basically it's for you. Because if you're always sick on the boat, then that could be a problem. But having said that, people do overcome seasickness. I would always say that it just takes a lot of boat time for you to get used to it. So we've had volunteers join us. At first, she would always get sick whenever she's on the boat, but then after a few days on the boat, she would get used to it. It's just that you have to be prepared. If you need to take anti-motion sickness, then you can do so, and things like that. And also, I guess one of the things that we do ask is that the person who wants to volunteer should be at least be physically able to get on and off the boat. It's for your own safety, because based on what Ensign Barahan has told us, it's very important then to keep in mind that when you're out at sea, yung safety mo is very, very important, especially for us, because we are ultimately responsible for people who are on the boat. So yun. So as long as you're physically able to be on the boat for long periods of time, and you are willing to learn to do what we do, then you would be more than qualified to join us. So,
Thank you, Dr. Acebes. I do not see further questions on the Q&A section. Here's something that just came in from Angelita Aguilar. The use of plastics in the country has reached a very alarming phase, as evidenced by its effects on the environment in general. What can your respective organizations do to further push for the passage of pertinent laws to immediately ban or strictly regulate the use of plastics in the country? She doesn't indicate the panelists, but all of you can please answer. She's from Shaman PCG. Thank you, Angelita.
Probably I'll go first. Thank you for asking that question. My research group in the MSI have been heavily involved in doing basic research on plastics. Probably from the academic sector, our main contribution is really knowledge. For example, in the past years, the Philippines has just accepted the fact that we are the third largest contributor of marine debris. Or right now, we've been reclassified as the fifth. But the Philippines actually do not have hard data to either validate or reject the classification. And the problem with that is that we've just been receiving the blames for all of the plastics that are found in the Southeast Asian waters. Data is very important because that becomes the basis for the law. Appropriate appropriate laws, appropriate measures, and sustainable methods that we can implement to actually curb or lessen or reduce plastics pollution. So on the part of the MSI, there is now a project called Plasmix. Plastics in the marine environment, aquatic system, and the trophic systems to baseline what's now the extent of the plastics pollution and gravity in the Philippines, how it is affecting our mariculture industry. It is important to quantify because only by quantification that the policymakers actually listen to us. And that's why there's a need for accounting and valuation of marine resources. Because without putting a value on certain things, it is difficult for the public and also for the policymakers to actually appreciate the extent of the problem. So that's one thing that we are doing. We're also looking at the possible impacts on the aquaculture industry. There are certain countries right now that do not want plastics, mariculture products that have ingested plastic. So they've raised their bars, they've raised their quality on the seafoods that they are accepting. And if the Philippines is a big polluter, there is a high probability that many of our aquaculture sites, including those where we grow clams and oysters, these products are already ingesting shellfish, and therefore later on in the future could affect our export of these products and also the consumption, how it's affecting the health of the Filipino consumers who are consuming these products, especially for oyster where we are eating it almost fresh. The other project that we are looking at is called the Plastic Count Philippines. It is funded by the Department of Science and Technology. If you ask the agencies right now, can we have a data on how much plastics we are producing? At least we've been trying in the past 2 years, but we have not successfully gathered or collected a unified, collated, comprehensive data for plastics production and wastes in the Philippines. So there is a project which we call the Plastic Count, making plastics problem in the Philippines visible. The idea here is to come up with a unified or a central repository for all the researchers, for all the historical data on the waste that we have, so that we would have a baseline. Why baseline is important? Because it allows us to understand what is the major plastics that actually get distributed out there. So it becomes then a basis of what policy, if we are going to prioritize what to ban, we have a basis on what products should be banned first. It also allows us to identify who are the producers, because by knowing the product out there, we would be able to know the producers, and therefore it is easier to get back into these big companies for their extended producer responsibility. It also allows us to visualize the problem. If you go, we will be launching it next year. If you go into that website, you zoom into Manila Bay, you'll be able to know how much plastics there are in Manila Bay, what types of plastics are found in the different environments, what is the vulnerability index of the different marine ecosystems. So it will go hand in hand with accounting and valuation, because with plastics pollution, there's environmental degradation. So all of this, for us, data is very important. What we want are policies that are actually driven by facts and rooted in science. So sorry, I've mentioned a lot, but those are some of the things that we are doing.
Thank you, Dr. Onda. Any more? Any more reply to the question?
For us, unfortunately, we're not doing anything large scale when it comes to addressing the plastic pollution, but we're doing more of awareness raising through our social media platforms. So we are also participating with the efforts of other groups like Plastic Free Ocean and Plastic Free Bohol. So more regional and local yung approach namin. So we do try to do some sort of inventory of the plastics that we do collect in our sites, where we have projects. But yes, so far, of what we do is more for awareness on the problems of plastic pollution.
Thank you, Dr. Sabes.
Yes, sir. For the Philippine Coast Guard, sir, as a law enforcement and humanitarian agency, we also partners with private groups like Plastic Free Bohol. I was able to work with them in Bohol when I was assigned there. We can provide manpower during cleanup drives. Also, we can, within ourselves, organize cleanup drives for the environment, sir.
Thank you, Ensign Barahan. I understand that some are raising their hands to ask a question, but unfortunately, you have to type in your question, because we have actually disconnected the live answer function. There's a question for Dr. Dayo. The question is there a big potential for Philippine tourism as far as deep sea exploration is concerned? Dr. Dayo?
I would like to believe yes, but I think two things that we need to consider. One are the investors. For example, just to give you an idea, for big, Caladan Oceanic has been already using this model. So they are bringing personalities who would like to go to the Mariana Trench in a very touristic model. So they pay and then they go there. Two investments. One is the submersible itself. The DSV limiting factor is the only IMO certified passenger safe submersible vessel. So that's one. To give you an idea how much it costs per dive, crossing around 10,000 meters, it's around $1 million per dive. So is there a potential? I would like to believe that there's a lot of interesting sites for tourism, for deep sea exploration in the Philippines, but I'm not sure if the market is towards the Philippines, probably some of the Filipinos. But yeah, the thing is that it's actually very expensive. I would see more investments actually coming into scientific explorations rather than tourism, at least for the moment. There is a need more longer term need for scientific exploration, not even to the Hadal depths, even just 1,000 meters or less than 1,000 meters, exploring the bottom of the seafloor on what types of resources we have and what types of biodiversity we have. There is a move now for certain institutes, I won't name them here, but there's a move for some institutes to actually request for a very capable open ocean and deep sea research vessel. So at least for tourism, I'm not sure, but for scientific purposes, yes, I think we're seeing an investment in the near future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dayo. I just received word from the MC that we can entertain one last question. And it happens to be something from a former MOAO officer named Marisa Winkler. It is for Ensign Barahan. She asks, did you feel any additional pressure after you received the IMO Bravery at Sea Award? Some people report feeling additional pressure in their lives after having given recognition for accomplishing an extraordinary act. Some do not like the additional attention. Thank you. Ensign Barahan, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for the question. Natatakot ako yung tanong yan because I really want to be honest with you. I really had a hard time after the award and the attention. I was trying to recover from the trauma and everything. It was really hard. Right after the awards and recognition, I trained for to become a commission officer. It was already hard, and I had a lot of pressure already for becoming an officer. Dadagdagan pa ng being regarded as a hero or being put into a pedestal na you have to be like this and that. But I always remind myself na wag ilagay sa ulo yung mga achievements na yun, because for me, I really don't think na hero ako because I regard myself as a survivor. Nire-remind ko yung sarili ko because yun nga, as what I've said, experiencing the wrath of nature firsthand is really humbling because you cannot really overcome nature. I was just lucky na we were able to survive. But making it something na as an achievement for me is not right. No, we are really ultimately at the nature's mercy. So yun, that's what I kept on reminding myself para hindi umabot sa ulo ko yung yung mga awards and recognition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ensign Barahan, and back to you, Director Francis.
Yes, thank you, sir. At this point will be the awarding of the certificate, sir. So if I can request our colleagues to please show the certificates for our speakers. Yes, Sir Das.
Okay. It's too small for me to read, Francis. Maybe you can
I'll
help
take care
an
of it.
old man with the with the certificate.
Yes, I'll take care of it, sir. So the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office presents this certificate of appreciation to Dr. Deo Florence L. Onda for his invaluable contribution as resource person at the webinar on Maritime Champions, Inspiring a Nation Through Action, held on 8 September 2021 in celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month on the topic Emden Deep Expedition, Challenges and Outcomes, given this 8th day of September 2021 in the city of Pasay, signed by our Assistant Secretary, Maria Angela Ponce.
Thank you po. Maraming salamat.
Okay. Please.
Next certificate, please. Also, the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office presents the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Jo Marie V. Acebes for her invaluable contribution as resource person at the webinar on Maritime Champions, Inspiring a Nation Through Action, held on the 8th of September 2021 in celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month on the topic Marine Conservation Through Whale and Dolphin Research, given this 8th day of September 2021 in the city of Pasay, signed by our Assistant Secretary, Maria Angela A. Ponce.
Maraming salamat. Thank you.
Next certificate, please. So the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office presents the certificate of appreciation to Coast Guard Ensign Ralph O. Barahan for his invaluable contribution as resource person at the webinar on Maritime Champions, Inspiring a Nation Through Action, held on the 8th of September 2021 in celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month 2021 on the topic Maritime Search and Rescue, the MV Siargao Princess Rescue, given this 8th day of September 2021 in the city of Pasay, signed by our Assistant Secretary, Maria Angela A. Ponce. And last but not least, the Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office presents the certificate of appreciation to Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda for her invaluable contribution as resource person at the webinar on Maritime Champions, Inspiring a Nation Through Action, held on the 8th of September 2021 in celebration of Maritime and Archipelagic Nation Awareness Month 2021 on the topic the critical role of legislation in marine conservation and protection, given this 8th day of September 2021 in the city of Pasay, signed by our Assistant Secretary, Maria Angela A. Ponce. At this point, I'd like to request our Deputy Assistant Secretary, Emmanuel R. Fernandez, for the closing remarks. Sir.
Thank you, Francis, and good morning, everyone. And to those of you who are joining us from other time zones, good afternoon or good evening, as the case may be. On behalf of MOAO, I would like to thank our panel of speakers for sharing with us the very inspiring stories of how they have championed our interests as a maritime and archipelagic nation. I am sure you will all agree with me when I say that their stories have made us realize how vast, diverse, and priceless indeed our maritime inheritance is. It is an inheritance that consists not only of oceans, seas, rivers, and invaluable maritime resources. It also consists of non-material maritime treasures, such as the reputation we have built as a nation of competent and valiant seafarers like Ensign Barahan, or world-class maritime scientists like Dr. Onda and Dr. Acebes, or dedicated environmental legislators like Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda. I hope that we will all come away from this webinar not only with a deepened sense of pride in our maritime heritage, but more importantly, with a growing resolve to help protect and preserve this heritage for the coming generations of Filipinos. Thank you very much and good day to everybody.
That marks the end of our webinar. The Department of Foreign Affairs, Maritime and Ocean Affairs Office wishes to thank all those who joined today's webinar, and we hope that you found it as interesting and inspiring as we did. We wish to thank Deputy Speaker Lauren Legarda, Philippine Coast Guard Ensign Ralph Barahan, Dr. Jo Marie Acebes, and Dr. Deo Florence Onda for their participation in our webinar. We also wish to thank the Office of Asset Management and Support Services for their kind assistance and technical support behind the conduct of this webinar, particularly Assistant Secretary Medardo Macaraig, Director Rovel Tixon, Mr. Raymark Espeleta, Ms. Judy Ann Carpo, and Ms. Hazel Nazareth. Thank you very much, and a good afternoon and a good day to all. Thank you, mga sir.
Salamat. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sir Francis. Thank you po, MOAO.
Thank you, sir.